The water in Cuxton Marina barely moved. The River Medway lay still under a heavy, silent sky. The dock was empty, no guards, no working security cameras, just fog and stillness. At 3:13 a.m., a small boat without lights drifted in and tied up beside the white motor yacht Albernina. On board were thick canvas bags, tightly wrapped bundles, and black crates strapped with industrial bands. The men moved fast and said nothing. 4 of them, in and out in 6 minutes. Then the boat pulled away, disappearing into the mist. What they left behind was no ordinary cargo. It wasn't cash. It wasn't narcotics. It was firepower. 22 AK-style assault rifles, 9 Skorpion submachine guns, 58 magazines, 2 suppressors, over 1,000 rounds of 7.62 mm ammunition. Nothing deactivated, nothing inert. These were live, fully automatic weapons, the kind designed for war zones, not city streets. Every rifle was ready to fire. Every box held potential bloodshed, enough to arm a full criminal unit, or worse. Had this shipment reached its buyers, the UK's black market for weapons would have been changed forever. But what they didn't know, they were being watched. The drop was recorded. The route had been tracked. Their boat had been flagged weeks earlier. And at that very moment, officers from the National Crime Agency were gathering in unmarked vans, watching everything unfold from the shadows. Harry Shilling stood on the bank, hands in his coat pockets. 25 years old, clean haircut, designer parka. He wasn't here for a paycheck. He was here for reputation. He called it elevation. This wasn't petty crime. This was international arms trafficking, smart routes, encrypted phones, real logistics, real control. In his mind, he wasn't a thug. He was a strategist. He would later call this the moment they became officially gangsters. But on this night, he was wrong. One mistake, one arrogant message too many, and what was meant to be the UK's largest arms import in decades was already falling apart. Harry Shilling wasn't your typical criminal. He didn't grow up poor. He didn't belong to a local gang. He didn't carry knives or peddle drugs on street corners. He was from the suburbs, educated in private school, polite when needed, and obsessed with one thing: status. He didn't just want money, he wanted recognition, respect, fear. He wanted to be someone talked about, quoted, respected, not for chaos or for power. In his head, the image of a criminal mastermind wasn't a back-alley thug, but a calculated business-like figure. Someone who didn't shoot but moved. Someone who didn't get his hands dirty, but built the network. That's why he used encrypted BlackBerry phones with PGP. That's why he sourced weapons not from gangs, but from black market contacts in Slovakia, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. The same routes previously linked to firearms used in the Paris terror attacks. Shilling was 25. Ambitious, naively bold. He wasn't just running a deal, he was crafting an identity. His vision? A new arms pipeline for the UK, disguised as collectible or deactivated military stock. But these guns weren't for display. They were fully functional, purchased in bulk for £200 apiece, and ready to sell in London for 5 to 6 times that. His plan wasn't just profitable, it was scalable. In a message to his partner, Michael Dufresne, Shilling wrote the phrase that would later become infamous in court: "We now officially gangsters." Defense lawyers would later claim it was a joke, a turn of phrase. But the NCA and prosecutors knew better. To Harry Shilling, this was real. He didn't want to be small-time. He wanted to be at the top, and thought he'd figured out how to get there without ever pulling a trigger. Around him was a tight crew. Dufresne handled movement, Daniel Payne arranged storage, David Rye helped coordinate deliveries, Christopher Owen managed logistics. All used PGP encrypted BlackBerry phones. Their chats were filled with code, tools, toys, the goods. Never direct, but always clear. They believed they were untouchable. That encryption made them invisible. That if they spoke in slang and moved at night, no one would ever catch on. They were wrong. And the messages they thought would protect them became evidence that would bury them. The plan Shilling built with Dufresne looked flawless on paper. It avoided trucks, customs queues, and container ports. It relied on water, small boats, quiet rivers, underguarded marinas. They would move military-grade firearms like weekend sailors. It was low risk, low visibility, and it worked. At first, the weapons came from Eastern Europe, Slovakia, Hungary, possibly the Czech Republic. Most were listed as deactivated or collectible, but they were anything but. Fully reactivated, cleaned, serial numbers scratched, ready to fire. They were bought cheap, with some for less than 300 pounds each, and moved to France or Belgium for staging. From there, the guns were loaded onto a white motor yacht. Albernina. The vessel was registered under a fake name and flew no flag. Its route hugged the French coastline, turned north across the channel, and slipped quietly into Kent, bypassing large ports and sticking to private marinas like Cuxton. The drop-off routine was always the same. After midnight, no lights, no noise. The weapons were packed in heavy-duty home-based bags, double-lined and grouped by type. Assault rifles in one, Skorpions in another, ammunition in watertight tubes, suppressors wrapped in rags. Every item marked and indexed like a product line. Once offloaded, the gear was either buried near the landing site or moved quickly to short-term rental units. In some cases, they were stashed in wooded areas, buried beneath shallow dirt and tagged by location. It was Shilling's distribution with padding, no single point of failure. They never used the same site twice. No names on leases, no fingerprints, only burners, only code. Shilling believed it was bulletproof. The encryption, the boating routes, the drop locations. He boasted about being smarter than the police, smarter than old-school gangsters. In messages, he mocked law enforcement, saying they were too analog to catch up. And for a while, it seemed like he was right. Everything was working. No raids, no interference, no heat. But what he didn't know was that Albernina had been flagged, and that quiet little marina in Kent was no longer empty. It was a trap, and the next run would be his last. The first alarm bell didn't come from London, it came from Belgium. Customs officers there flagged a bulk purchase of firearms labeled as deactivated, but showing clear signs of reactivation. The batch was linked to known trafficking channels headed toward the UK. The method wasn't by air or highway, it was by water. That's when Britain's National Crime Agency took notice. The yacht Albernina caught their attention weeks later. White hull, quiet motor, strange route, no consistent port, no flagged registry. Its pattern traced along the French coast, crossing toward Kent, skipping major ports entirely. It didn't fit the usual picture, but it fit something worse, a new kind of smuggling. Surveillance teams were deployed, not just at sea, but digitally. Analysts began tracking encrypted BlackBerry devices suspected of using PGP protocols. A few identifiers started overlapping. Phone signals near marinas, GPS pings aligning with Albernina's known routes, conversations filled with odd euphemisms. Tools arriving, packages prepped, delivery by dawn. Separately, they meant little. Together, they meant trafficking. Undercover units were placed at Cuxton Marina. Motion-activated cameras were installed. Optical zoom lenses watched the docks from vans parked half a mile out. The yacht's movements were logged, its arrivals, its departures. Each landing was time-stamped and photographed. Then came the digital break. Working with Dutch and Canadian cybersecurity teams, the NCA gained partial access to one of the crew's PGP message backups. It wasn't much, a handful of decrypted fragments, but it was enough. In one, Shilling referred to the cargo as ready for the street. In another, if this one lands clean, we scale up fast. And finally, they won't see it coming. We're ghosts. But they had already been seen. Every message, every move, now part of a case file. The NCA wasn't guessing anymore. They were preparing. And the next time Albernina touched English soil, they'd be waiting. On August 11th, 2015. Morning broke quietly over Cuxton Marina. A light mist clung to the River Medway. The docks were calm, nothing unusual, no sirens, no shouting. But beneath the surface, everything was different. At exactly 6 a.m., 3 NCA tactical units converged on the marina. No lights, no warning, just gloves, masks, and precision. The target, Albernina, and the men surrounding her. Harry Shilling stood on shore, watching the water, hands in his coat. Calm, confident. Michael Dufresne was nearby, checking bags on the dock. Daniel Payne lingered near a van, parked with the rear doors cracked open. All of them believed the shipment had landed clean. Another run, another profit, just like the last. They had no idea they were under surveillance. No idea they'd been watched for weeks. No idea the entire dock was wired, until it was too late. The takedown was swift, no resistance, no chance to run. In less than 4 minutes, all 5 men, Shilling, Dufresne, Payne, David Rye, and Christopher Owen, were in custody. No dramatic standoff, just stunned silence. But what came next confirmed everything. Inside Albernina, 22 AK-type assault rifles, 9 Skorpion submachine guns, 58 magazines, over 1,000 rounds of live ammunition, 2 suppressors. All weapons were fully functional. No deactivation tags, no blanks. Some still coated in factory oil, others freshly clean. It wasn't museum stock. It was war-grade hardware, primed for combat, not collection. For the NCA, this was the biggest firearms seizure on UK mainland soil. Not handguns, not antiques. These were automatic weapons capable of unleashing mass death. Enough firepower to equip a full urban hit squad, or worse. As one officer put it bluntly, if this reached the streets, it would have been a bloodbath. Shilling's encrypted phones were seized, messages reviewed, locations triangulated, and the bravado that once filled his chats now stood as damning evidence. His infamous line, typed just weeks earlier, echoed in court records. "We now officially gangsters." Only now it was no longer swagger. It was a confession. The trial began in spring 2016, under high security at the Old Bailey, London's Central Criminal Court. On the bench, 5 defendants: Harry Shilling, Michael Dufresne, Daniel Payne, David Rye, Christopher Owen. Each faced charges of conspiracy to import firearms, possession with intent to supply, and running an international smuggling ring. The prosecution laid out the case in detail: chat transcripts, surveillance images, GPS routes, expert testimony on the firearms. The encryption wasn't enough. Every move had been logged. Every code phrase, toys, packages, drops, was matched with physical evidence. In court, a forensic analyst read aloud one of the key messages from Shilling: "We now officially gangsters." He had sent it after one of the early drops, believing he'd crossed some line into criminal prestige. For the court, it was a confession, a moment of ego, captured forever in text. Judge Michael Topolsky was direct. In his sentencing remarks, he stated, "This was not a game. These were real weapons, automatic, lethal, intended for use, not for display." He called the seizure a catastrophic risk narrowly averted. The sentences were severe. Harry Shilling, 30 years in prison, plus 5 years extended license. A total of 35 years. Michael Dufresne, 27 years. David Rye and Daniel Payne, 19 years each. Christopher Owen, 5 years. The judge emphasized that the threat posed by the weapons, if they had reached the streets, was immeasurable. Each gun had the potential to turn local disputes into armed massacres. This wasn't theoretical violence. It was industrial-scale preparation. The NCA released a public statement following the verdict. This was the largest seizure of automatic weapons ever on UK mainland. We believe this group could have changed the face of armed crime in Britain. Fortunately, they failed. But even with the operation dismantled, the system remained. The fear wasn't just what they moved, it was how easily they moved it. The trial ended. The sentences were passed. The yacht Albernina was impounded. The weapons destroyed. But for investigators, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a narrow escape. During the investigation, intelligence agencies confirmed the same Eastern European suppliers had previously moved firearms used in the Paris terror attacks, including the assault on Charlie Hebdo. The Skorpion SMGs and AK-style rifles smuggled by Shilling's crew shared identical manufacturing origins. They came through the same underworld pipeline. Only this time, the UK caught it in time. No terrorism charges were filed. Shilling's intent, as far as the court could prove, was profit, not ideology. But the threat was undeniable. The NCA stated plainly, had these weapons fallen into extremist hands, the outcome could have been catastrophic. We don't say this lightly. Lives were saved. This wasn't just a gang. This was infrastructure. Harry Shilling became a name not because of bloodshed, but because of what almost happened. He wanted power, image, a legacy. He nearly got one, built not on violence but logistics. Now he sits behind bars in a high-security prison. His sentence, 35 years. His plan, undone. But the method remains. Encrypted phones, sleeper marinas, rewired rifles. It's all still possible. And someone, somewhere, may be reading about Shilling right now. Not as a criminal, but as a case study. That's the real legacy of this operation. It wasn't just about weapons. It was about how close we came to disaster and how quickly it can happen again.